All right, Tallulah. Let's not chew on those yet. Okay, so in this video, we're going to go over ways that we can disagree with our dog in a way that the dog's going to understand and respect. So basically, I don't like using the word no to disagree with dogs because no is the 51st most commonly used word in the English language. So I like using a hissing sound like a cat. I do this because cats, skunks, snakes, cougars, mountain lions, all sorts of animals make a hissing sound as a warning. So Mother Nature put that recognition in your dog that is a warning. So I prefer to do it before the dog does the wrong thing. So if the dog is about to cross a boundary or about to do something you don't want, that's when we want to go ahead. Yes, I know, you got the wiggles, don't you? That's when we make the hissing sound. It's like this. As you can see, most dogs respond to it immediately because Mother Nature's put the recognition in. All right, so the first thing I do is I hiss. I have 10 hisses. I have a level 1 hiss, like tss. I have a level 10 hiss, which is more like tss. So you need to moderate your hiss and modulate it so you're appropriate to the dog's level of energy. If the dog is too excited or at level 9 energy and I hiss at level 3, either won't listen or won't respond to it. So the first thing I do is I hiss. Second thing I do is I suddenly stand up and turn to face the dog. Standing up is your I mean business position to a dog. So if you're yelling at your dog from a seated position or you silently just stand up, silently standing up is much more powerful. Tallulah, if you could, sweetheart, if you can make sure she doesn't chew my shirt. I have some treats in my other shirt that the other dog's going for. Okay, so the second thing I do is when I stand up to communicate no, I do it in a very big, bold movement. When dogs communicate through movement, it's a big, bold movement. The rest of the time they just meander around. So stand up, I call it jack in the boxing up, stand up immediately. Now your authority goes whatever direction your hips and shoulders are pointing. So if you stand up and the dog is right here in front of you and it moves there, and I continue facing here, the dog literally walked away from my authority. So as I get up, if the dog walks that way, I pivot. I pivot back, and I wait until, and I keep keeping the dog in front of me until it is stationary. It can stand in place, it can sit, it can lie down. Or it can leave the room if it has that authority. Now, that's my second consequence. The third consequence is I stand up abruptly and march at the dog. If I'm already standing, I just march directly at the dog. Now, when you're doing this, it needs to be a sudden movement. The dog needs to think, if I'm still here, when the human gets here, the human is running me over. So the dog goes to the side, you go to the side. You keep marching at the dog. Now, if the dog is just backing up and still facing you, it's still challenging. When a dog wants to communicate that it understands what you mean, it's going to turn sideways to you, or greater. As soon as it turns sideways, we want to stop marching. And I stand in place, and at that point I start pivoting, and I keep the dog in front of me until it's stationary. Now if it sits, I take a giant step backwards, or I would sit down. That's my way of communicating. Because the dog sat, which is a way of saying I'm challenging you less, I say I'm showing you less authority by taking a softer posture. Now, but when you're moving towards the dog, you need to do very briskly. The dog needs, like I said, think that it's going to get run over. The last consequence that I have is what I call a leash timeout. The leash timeout is just like a human kid timeout. We're going to basically put the dog on a leash, and we're going to step on it about a foot away from its head for a dog that's this size. When he is full grown, it'd be about 3 feet away. What we're doing is saying, look, I told you with a no before you broke the rule with the hiss. Second thing I did was I marched at you, or I stood up and you did it again, so I marched at you. Now you're doing it the fourth time, now you're being defiant. So if you're going to challenge me at defiance, the consequence is you lose all freedom until you return to a completely calm state of mind. Now, some dogs will throw a temper tantrum when they do this. Just ignore. Don't correct. Wait. When they sit down, take your foot that's on the leash that's closest to the dog and slide it towards the dog to take the tension off of the leash. Dogs have what's known as an opposition reflex. They will automatically pull against the leash. As soon as it sits down, then I would basically wait for it to lie down. I don't tell it to sit and I don't tell it to lie. As soon as it lies down, then I basically take my foot off the leash very subtly so the dog doesn't even realize it. Now the dog is now on the leash but is free. It can get up, it's going to drag the leash with it. Dogs should not drag the leash around unsupervised. It could injure itself. If a couple minutes later it revs back up, then we can go ahead and step on the leash and reapply the consequence. If a couple minutes later it stays calm, then we can go ahead and take the leash off and it's not quid pro quo. So you can also, those are the 4 escalating consequences. Now we can combine them. Let's say we spilled some aspirin or something that's dangerous for the dog and it's about to go get it, we might hiss, stand up, and march at it all in one move, and that's a really strong move. When you stand up abruptly, the dog should take a step back. That's its way of saying, I'm going to give you some space because it looks like you're taking action. And after a while, at first it'll be hiss, then you have to stand up, then you have to march, and then you have to do the leash timeout. After a while, it'll just be hiss, stand up, march, no leash. Then it'll just be hiss, stand up, then it will just be hiss. I can get my dog to drop a live squirrel out of his mouth with a hiss, but he knows if he doesn't, I'm following up with other consequences. One other thing, he's a puppy, so we don't have a collar on him yet. We want to get a collar. He's going to scratch at it because he would prefer not to wear one, but it's important for him to get used to wearing one. Some people will not have them if they're around a kennel or something that can get caught on. I think that you can do that, but it's not very often that's going to be the case. I would rather just change the environment so there's nothing dangerous. Now, once the dog gets used to the collar, going to be about a week or two, stop scratching at it. Then I would put a leash on it at times and let it drag the leash around the house. Eventually, he'll step on it accidentally and stop himself. He'll get used to a little bit of attention on the leash. But we do not want to start pulling a dog on the leash because we will activate its opposition reflex and we'll set it up for a lifetime of pulling against the leash. What we're going to do is in a couple weeks, we're going to do another follow-up session and we're going to start working on some basic puppy obedience and loose leash training where we're going to teach him to walk at a heel without even using a leash. That'll be for later. So on this one, we're just going to wrap up. Remember, use the escalating consequences consistently. And when you disagree with your dog, you want to disagree before they get into trouble with the hiss. And then after they do anything that's wrong, we want to do these escalating consequences within a maximum of 3 seconds, but your target should be within 1/3 of a second. Is that right, buddy? That's how we can use escalating consequences to disagree with their dog.